everybody. Welcome to UFO Enigma. I'm your host, Ron Rickey. And tonight we have a guest. It's Sean Melendi.
Yes.
And you're a mid-schooler from Easton. And I might add, I just met Sean. He's a very, very avid fan. So we'll get right down to business. And tonight, or today, whatever, we're going to concentrate on the Washington National Sightings. Okay. Now I've drawn a little map here giving the build-up of the Washington National Sightings. This was actually a series of very good sightings. It wasn't just one sighting. So I'll give the build-up, and I might add that this happened in 1952, July, and up until July of 1952, the Air Force had investigated something like 615 or 17 sightings.
Wow.
In this one flap alone, they investigated 717 sightings. So within about a 2 or 3 week period, they surpassed what they had investigated previously. Okay. Why don't we start right at the beginning? I picked out a few of the very good sightings that started this here. And it was usually, they say it began around June 1st. Okay, but one of the best sightings was right up here in Newfoundland, so off the map. It was Goose Air Force Base in Newfoundland. A C-54 transport was flying from Westover, here in Massachusetts, to Goose Air Force Base, and they were buzzed by a very large, very fiery UFO, bright orange. And they called in to the base, the radar base at Goose, and they asked if they had anything on their radar screen. And come to find out, the men on the tower said, yes, we do have a UFO. And it was coming very quickly towards them. Well, a couple of men walked down from the radar tower, and were standing outside, and sure enough, here it comes. Great big orange UFO coming in with a spark trail behind it, and very low. In fact, it came in so low that the men actually dived under the car. There was like an officer and a sergeant. They were standing there watching it. And as it did this, it just made a 90-degree turn and flew off to the northwest. And that would leave out a meteor automatically. So, sighting number one, unknown. They don't know what it was. This is the only one, mind you now, that was actually heading northwest. After it left Goose, it was seen heading off this way. All the rest of these sightings were more or less southwest, and everything was coming down towards Washington, D.C., where the big sighting was going to be. And then way down off the map, they were having another flurry down there too at Patrick Air Force. It was a missile testing range, and they were having 2 or 3 weeks of sightings down there. So it more or less ranged along the whole East Coast. There was good sightings inland, but you could see there was a concentration building up here.
Oh.
Good.
They knew it couldn't have been a meteor because the meteor would just go straight down after them, so it can't just like go off target, right?
No, I don't think any astronomer has ever recorded a meteor changing course, either a 90 or even a variable. They've never seen them go up, and these fireballs have been seen to go up. They've been seen to go down, make right-hand turns. So that lets out a natural phenomenon. It has to be something. Okay, then let me see. About 2 weeks later, right here in Massachusetts, we had to get into the act. Let me see. We got pictures of this one. Yeah, Sean, you want to put that? Just hold that one up there. All right, the first sighting started over this was on July 1st, and a number of UFOs were spotted over a Coast Guard facility in Salem. There's a couple of pictures. I got pictures there, and there's a couple pictures in this book too. This various picture has been this has been shown quite a bit. About an hour later, UFOs were spotted from the ground in Lynn. Not as many as this. They spotted 2 in Lynn, so whether they were the same ones or 2 of those had left, we don't know. But by this time, the powers to be were getting very nervous in Lynn, in the Massachusetts, and they scrambled a couple of fighters from Hanscom,
Yes.
who went up to chase them, and nothing was ever, they didn't even get near them. So that, more or less, the sighting just fizzled. The UFOs went somewhere, and
Sure.
they
Yeah.
flew back. The caliber of the sighting, the people sighting these so far were perfect. These were all military men at Goose. We had military men here in Massachusetts, plus civilians, spotters on the ground, and military spotters on the ground. So you can't really question who was turning these reports in. They weren't crackpots.
When the UFOs fly, do they fly in any significant patterns? If there's more than one?
Flight paths have been tracked, and later on in the show we can turn to this book, and they have everything on a chart. The UFOs that come across in straight lines, horizon to horizon, in single or in formation. There are some that flutter like a leaf. There's some that zigzag. You know, they use all kinds of impossible maneuvers.
Was there any physical evidence found there?
Physical, on this particular sighting, from all the reading that I've done, no. There was no physical sighting, but later on in the show, if we have time, we can discuss physical evidence. We have angel hair, which I happen to pick out of this book. They've dropped slag on occasions, pieces of metal. Angel hair is, I think, probably the most common.
On the metal, could they find out anything, like if they could shoot radar at it and go through?
Well, all tests so far have proved that the metal could be made right here on Earth. The mixture might be different, the way they make the alloy, but it's common materials, magnesium.
The angel hair you were talking about, I'll let you talk about it later on the show, but was it like space dust or
No.
thicker? Or
It looked like a snow cone, not, what do you, the
cotton candy?
cotton candy that you buy at the carnivals.
Oh, yes.
The only difference is that you can't touch it. The minute you touch it, it sort of dissolves. I
So
suppose
I
you could
couldn't
pick,
save it.
yeah, you could
unless-
pick it up with a stick maybe and put it in a bag. That might hold it, because we do have pictures here of it, so.
Yeah.
Okay, now, let me see. As we come down, a couple hours after the Massachusetts sightings, UFOs were spotted in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Now, this is interesting because it was 12 radar students and 3 instructors were the first ones to spot it on radar. And it was, let me see, several UFOs coming across, and unidentified. But the thing that made this sighting real interesting was that there was someone in Washington, not Washington, there was someone near Fort Monmouth on the ground outside of a radar shack that saw the UFOs along with the radar. So, conclusion on that one, unknown also. And then as we come down, you notice now we're getting very close to Washington. We're down here in Virginia. On the 7th, the 13th, and the 15th, UFOs were reported by airline pilots.
Wow. That's
Okay, let me say, I think the one on the 10th was spotted at 2,000 feet by an airline pilot as he was making an approach to Washington. The one on the 13th was spotted at 11,000 feet, so he was leaving Washington, and he was being trailed. The one on the 14th was probably the best sighting because it was not only picked up by the radar at Washington National, it was picked up by 2 other radars. It was picked up by 2 military radars, along with the radar on the airplane and the visual.
So it couldn't be just
it was
radar.
a good sighting, and
Yeah.
they gave a pretty good. They got a good look at it. It more or less looked like these. Most of the sightings were of this small disc shape. 2 of them were like the Goose Air Force Base ones, the real big fireball.
Oh.
So then from
Did any land in any of these sightings?
no. From all that I've read on it, there was no landings at all. There might have been, and they just never were reported. But it's quite possible. But it seemed like everything was just converging. They had their mind set on getting to Washington, whether to maybe they wanted to start a checking account. You know?
Or tell the president something?
But all of it was heading, for some reason, for some unknown reason, they wanted to be known. And they made sure everybody along the whole coastline saw them coming in for a couple of weeks before the big due.
Oh, yeah.
Any more on that Fort Monument there that you want to? There really wasn't too much. It was spotted on radar, and it was a fairly brief sighting.
So nothing was really...
Right. It was just a pair of, a few lights in the sky. And then another Air Force base come into play. See, 2 days later, okay, directly east of Washington is Langley Air Force Base. On that day, a scientist and a co-observer, now this is a man with a very, very high rating. He was a professor in a college or what have you. They saw two UFOs maneuvering. They watched for a few minutes. This was a rather lengthy sighting. Then as they were watching, another UFO came off from the horizon, joined up with them, and they decided to do a little maneuvering, all 3 of them. And as they're watching this, they see 6 or 7 more come up from the horizon. So it started off with 2, but it ended up with a pretty good visual sighting with about...
Do you think they hooked together and just make one big one? Or?
I think they were putting on a show. I think they were, they were off to maybe hiding somewhere, and they knew they had some people watching, and they said, "Well, we're here. Let's show them we're going."
They just don't go like to Shaw's or anything. They knew that they were
Exactly
watching.
right. They were there for a reason. And as in the other sightings, the caliber of observer here was probably A++. We're talking scientific man here. So that sort of led everything up to the Great Washington National Sighting. And it started about 11 o'clock at night on the night of July 19th. And it started off with 8 UFOs being tracked on the Washington National radar. It started off innocent enough because the people had they'd been forewarned. They had some sightings, and it wasn't a complete surprise. It's, oh, here they are again.
Yeah.
Here's 8 more of them. So I
They knew they were going to keep...
Right. I see. Maybe we could do the break.
Yeah, sure.
And then we'll continue on with because this particular sighting will probably take the rest of the show.
Yeah.
We'll go to break now.
All across America, cable TV people are getting involved, like the Cable Buddies program, helping troubled students stay in school.
Mrs. Fox?
Or cable customer
just
service
calling.
representatives, helping the housebound just get along. Now nationwide, cable goes to school, helping kids to learn with the Cable Alliance for Education. Seems like everywhere you look, cable people are getting involved to make your community a better place to live.
Looking beyond your imagination.
imagination. Tomorrow, fiber optics, high-definition television for the sharpest picture ever. Beyond tomorrow.
Honey, tonight we're tuning in the world.
Snow looks great. Roads look good too.
Cable television. Looking at your future every day.
You know what to buy.
The library!
There's no need to shout.
The library. Know-how. No charge.
Dad?
Yes?
Dad, how do you make a baby?
The library. Know-how. No charge.
Hi, my name's Dave LaPointe, and I'm here to talk about voting. Right now in front of me is a copy of the 15th Amendment, Section 1. The rights of citizens in the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Now I'm going to read the meaning of the word vote. A usual formal expression of opinion or will in response to a proposed decision. That's what voting means. So when you turn 18, register to vote. Thank you.
Welcome back to UFO Enigma, and I'm Ron Rickey, your host, and here's Sean, still with us with more questions. And when we left for the break, we had just gotten into the big sightings at Washington, D.C. Now, it all started, innocently enough, it was 8 UFOs being tracked by the Washington National radar. Now, they spotted the UFOs were over, more or less over Andrews Air Force Base, a very close base to Washington. There's, around the Potomac, there's a bunch of air bases. There's Andrews, Washington National, and a couple of lesser ones. And so they sort of saw them coming in. These UFOs were starting to drift around and checking the place out. And before you know it, Andrews scrambles a flight of fighters. The speeds were unbelievable. When they come in, radar tracked them at like between 100, 130 miles an hour. And within 3 or 4 sweeps of the radar, the speeds would be up to like 7,000 miles an hour. I mean,
Couldn't be a truck or a car, anything like that.
It wasn't right. It wasn't a false image, not at that speed. And but can you imagine the speed though? Have you ever seen a jet fighter go over?
Yeah.
See, they're not allowed to really break. They're not allowed to break the sound barrier. So they're doing under like 700, and that's fast. So can you imagine something?
What we can do on Earth.
Right. Can you imagine something doing 7 times? Yeah, 10 times that. You know.
Wow.
That's flying. All right. So the fighters get up there, and they had a number of sightings. The pilots spotted them. They were using F-94 Starfighters at the time, which was probably the best ship we had for 1952, probably the fastest. And it had a radar man in the back. It was a fighter. It was armed. The radar man would be talking with the radar man on the ground, and they'd get a cross-check like, do you see this blip on your scope? After they confirmed it, the fighter pilot would go in. They could never get really close. They would get within a couple miles of it, and the UFO would just take right off, you know. So they wouldn't let them get a close look at it. Then,
could you hear like the noise of?
No. From what I understand, no one got close enough to hear any hums, buzzes, or anything physical. It's all visual.
Like, so they weren't real close to Earth, because like, I know in space you can't hear anything because you need.
No, these were close.
So these were up in space.
No, these were close. These were like flying 1,600 feet and lower.
Wow.
So they were buzzing. And I might add that most of the Washington airspace is restricted. You can't fly over the White House, for instance. If you had a little Cub or a little private airplane and you happened to fly over the White House, there'd be big trouble. Nothing is supposed to go over the Capitol building, the White House, the Pentagon. Any of those buildings are off limit. And these fellas here were just doing anything they wanted to do. If they wanted to fly over the Capitol building, they were there, right? So because they knew no one could touch them. At the end of this particular sighting, this one here lasted more or less the whole night of the 19th and 20th. Sort of ended up with a large UFO being spotted by all radars, and the personnel at the Andrews facility went outside and they saw a huge fireball at the end of their runway, which sort of brings back the Goose Bay, the big orange fireball. Yeah. So those were the two fireball sightings.
How would they know it's not like one of their ships caught on fire or anything? It's not as big, or?
Well, it just didn't look. It just didn't look like something of ours. You know, it was.
It caught on fire. Yeah.
This fireball, for one thing, was standing still at times. So if it was a plane crashing, or one of our planes going down, they could see it crashing. And then Ed Ruppelt, who wrote. You can see this book has been pretty well used by me, the Report on Unidentified Flying Objects. Ed Ruppelt was the chief of Project Blue Book at the time. And he coined the phrase in this book, the Washington merry-go-round. And you know why he did that, because the military was just going crazy. They didn't know what. They were getting reports. Newspaper men were barging into radar rooms as soon as they got a sighting, it was very scary. I mean, this was the nation's capital, and here they are running around like chickens. They didn't know what to do. Half of them didn't know what their own men were doing, from what I understand, that things got so confused. So it would have been okay, really. It would have been another good sighting, but then comes the sighting at July 26th. Okay, this one here was a combined visual, radar, anything you want to see. You could go out and look at these things. You could catch them on radar. Planes went up. And the Air Force totally panicked on this one. The first sighting was several UFOs on the screen, and the first thing they did was usher all the media right out of the control rooms. I mean, they said, "This is it. This is closed now." They ordered all civilian traffic out of the air in and around Washington. The only thing up there was UFOs and our fighter planes, which weren't doing too much, mind you. And with the open sky, the fighter pilots actually had dogfights with these lights. They were trying to close in on them, and the UFO would just be standing there and say, "Come on." They get into it like the same few nights before. They'd get into within a couple of miles, a mile or two, and see you later. The thing would just take right off. And
have you seen any of yourself?
Yeah, I've spotted them on 2 occasions. How about you?
I saw it one. It was just a bright light, and all I saw, it went down, up, and just went just in different directions. I knew it couldn't have been a plane, because a plane couldn't have gone in different directions so fastly.
How long did you see it?
I saw it just for 15 seconds or 10
very,
seconds.
Very brief sighting. Was it here in Easton?
Yes, it was. It was about looking up northwest.
Okay, that'd be sort of looking up towards Lynn, that way, up to the North Shore.
Like that, around there.
You've got colors?
Yeah, it was just whitish, and then sometimes it turned to blue, and then it stayed.
Too bad you didn't see it a little longer. That sounds like a pretty good sighting.
Interesting.
Did you tell anybody? Besides this,
After I saw it, I stayed watching it because it's so interesting. So after it was done, I was so scared. I was in some kind of little.
Was you afraid to tell your friends the next day?
No.
No? Did you tell them?
Yeah. And
Did they laugh at you?
Yeah. They don't believe in this stuff because they don't want to.
Well, I bet you feel very privileged in seeing one.
Oh, I do.
Because you saw one and they didn't, and I think that's a lot.
My parents have seen a couple, they say, up and around the same place.
From your home?
Yeah.
It sounds to me like you ought to set a camera up there and.
We don't have, like, I was just about to run and get it, but I mean, if I didn't stay out, I couldn't tell what happened and if it stayed there or not.
You know, I have lots of magazines, books, and in 2 or 3 of these magazines, it tells you how to build a UFO detector. That might make a nice show someday.
Yeah.
It gives you the whole. One of them is very simple. You could probably build it in school. The other one looks a little bit like you might have to go to Radio Shack and buy parts and resistors and whatever. But that might make a good show. I have to look into that. So as we go along here on the 26th, after all this rigmarole from the 26th sighting, planes being chased, and we do have. This is probably the best picture I have of that particular sighting, and it's very dramatic. I hope the camera can pick it up. It shows the Capitol building, and it shows a squadron of UFOs here, and there's one just barely you can see on top of the dome here. That's a UFO too, so there's a dozen of them. And the this was analyzed by a Major Coleman von Kavicki. He was the Air Force's. He could tell you what was in a movie or a film.
Yeah.
But he broke them down, and he claims that there was like 4 more behind here. He says, and the way that these things are all lined up, he says that's a battle formation.
Oh,
That's kind of scary, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Here we have. I mean, our whole country is being run right from here. You're not supposed to fly over it. You can go visit it, but they're watching you, and these things are just coming around and doing whatever they want to do. And he claimed that it was a defensive, though. It was a defensive formation. It wasn't an attack formation. And he talks about the pilots and stuff like he knew them. He was talking about the leader, the commander, and they did do a movie. It was entitled "The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects." It was mainly taken from Ruppelt's book, but this man that took the picture didn't release it for I think 20 years until after it happened, so it never made it into any of the books. This magazine happened to get it back in the 60s. So, let's see, I think we got to get to the conclusions.
Could we communicate with any of these? Did they ever try, or did they?
Yes, in fact, I understand that we just allotted in the government something like $2 or $3 million or $1 billion in California to build a station to receive signals from space. This is in addition to what we already have. We have huge radio telescopes. Oh. But to make it quick, any of the radar sightings that were mentioned, the Air Force was just trying to brush it off. They said the radar sightings were either false images by temperature inversion, or that the radar operators couldn't really read it. They sloughed that off, and then the visual sightings, they said all those were airplanes and balloons and birds. But according to many books that I've read, the official conclusion was unknown. And, well, this has been a very, very fast half hour, and it's been nice having you with me on the show.
Thanks.
And hopefully we can do it again.
Sure.
And
I'd be glad to.
Let me see here. Should we add a little levity to the show? In the words of the immortal Major Mudd, we'll be blasting you. Yeah. That it?